Notice how the everyday nature around you makes you feel. It's a big difference. It's a big, what we would call in psych, an effect size. And I find that really interesting because when I've tested that against other kinds of well-being, there's something about nature that is adding something extra.
Welcome to the Bountiful podcast. I'm Shan, and this is a space for curious, thoughtful conversations about what it really means to live a bountiful life. In a world that often rewards more, faster, and louder, Bountiful exists to slow things down, to explore joy, resilience, creativity, and the small choices that shape how we live every day. Each episode is a conversation with someone who's thought deeply about life, work, health, money, relationships, or purpose, and what they've learned along the way. If you're looking for ideas you can actually live with, you're in the right place.
Today's guest is Professor Holli-Anne Passmore. She directs the Nature, Meaning and Life Research Lab, where she explores nature connectedness and nature's impact on our well-being. In this conversation, we discuss how our relationship with nature shapes our sense of meaning, connection, and overall well-being. We talk about attention restoration, boredom, purpose, and existential anxiety. You'll discover why noticing everyday nature, even for a few minutes, can increase joy, elevation, and resilience. The conversation weaves science with lived experience, exploring what it truly means to live a bountiful life by slowing down and remembering we are part of nature.
Holli-Anne, welcome to the Bountiful podcast.
Hello, thanks so much for having me here. It's very exciting.
I've never been to Canada for the podcast before, so thank you for being my first Canadian guest.
Yay!
The background on why I wanted to talk to you was because I love nature, and I think we can either be a product of our environment or our environment can be a product of us. And I just really want to talk about, our environment, nature's impact on our well-being and all of that good stuff, which is, what you're known for.
That's very true.
So obviously we had a pretty lengthy pre-call, but I wanted to begin with a quote that I think is great to start this episode. One of your favorite sayings is, "Don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive." Can you tell me what that means to you?
Yeah, for sure. I really do like that quote. I think that one of the things, particularly as a professor, I see this in students a lot, and just in general with people, is it's always, students will take classes for what's it going to get me? What job am I going to get? How's this going to make me look to the world? How's this going to enhance my reputation? And those are all such secondary kinds of rewards, right? I think that what you really need to do is exactly that. What makes you come alive? Or the other way I often say it is, what's the shower question is, aside from any bizarre things people might think about in the shower, it's just the kind of thing is, what makes you feel that life is worth living? What makes life meaningful for you? When do you just feel your natural self, that you forget about kind of this idea of who you are as a human being, and you're being, and you feel joyful and peaceful all at the same time? That's how you should be living your life. When there's an incongruity when it's, I'm in this profession because that's what the world needs, there's all that, you're never going to be your full self. You're never going to achieve true flourishing. And I don't think you're really doing the best for what the world is either.
Awesome. So can you tell me a little bit about your upbringing and background?
It's a pretty relatively normal background in some ways. So born and raised here in Edmonton. One of the things that was really great, well, two things actually. One was my grandparents and my parents had a cabin out in the woods, but we would go there and it was just, complete forest, little log cabin. We spent a lot of time there growing up. Weekends, in the winter, the summer, probably impacted me in a lot of ways that I'm not necessarily even aware of. And I think the other thing that actually really has nothing to do with nature is the fact that, so I was born with a fairly rare genetic condition. It's a neuromuscular disorder, it's degenerative. Growing up that way really just taught you, it puts a lot of perspective on things, I think, on life, of what can be achieved, what can't be achieved, the idea of fun, what making things your own way. So I think those were really impactful things for how I grew up.
And then tell me a little bit about sort of your early career, and then we'll get into what ended up happening, which I think is like also very empowering.
Oh, okay. So early career. So I didn't start academia until I was quite old. So I always wanted to be a psychologist. I'm not a psychologist. I have my PhD is in psych, but I'm not a clinician. And I always just found psychology fascinating. I was a geek who, like summer holidays, I'd be reading stuff by Carl Jung and Freud and stuff. And so I really always I had this idea that I wanted to be a psychologist, to help people, to understand what makes people tick. That was kind of my thing. And then I don't know, there just stuff happened, and I ended up doing a bunch of different things as a career, as a project manager for architectural signage company, and I worked in IT and had a software company, software development, web design stuff. And then so I ended up, when I worked for the federal government quite a long time ago now, and they had a program where they would fund your education, and it didn't have to be anything necessarily to do with the job that you were at. And so I started, I should try to get my undergrad degree. And I really always thought I was too stupid to go to university, which obviously isn't the case. But somewhere along the line, I somehow thought that. And so it was really empowering to take those as an adult. And I got my degree from when I was 41 to 50, my undergraduate, because I was working full time. One of the first papers I wrote, I remember the prof, who was Russ Powell, just wrote the comment back, you should be doing graduate studies. I was like, maybe I'm not so stupid. Then I did my master's and PhD from when I was 50 to 56. And then I did a postdoc from 56 till 57. It was supposed to be for 2 years. But then I really wanted to move back to Edmonton. And so I got the job offer here from Concordia University of Edmonton. So it's kind of weird because while I'm technically an early career researcher, like everybody else is retiring at my age. I'll be 62 in a couple of months, about a month and a half. Mm. So it's just been a very different trajectory of like how I got into academia.
The question I really want to ask is did you think you weren't that smart for like the first 40 years of your life?
So I don't think it was that I didn't think it was smart. I think it was something about, like, nobody in my family had gone to university before, right? So there's also that. People put these presumptions on people, right? I'm small, I'm gimpy, I'm a female. You're supposed to be cute and stupid. And I tend to be pretty happy most of the time. And somehow society looks at that as cute and stupid.
I feel like you almost started life again at 41 or 50 or whatever you want to call it. And I find that deeply inspiring. I feel like so many people walk through life, and when they get to 50, they're kind of like, okay, my life is over now. Then they start thinking about retirement. And you're like, no, there's this thing that I have always wanted to do, so I'm going to go do it. Like, where did that sort of come from? And like, was it courage or just like kind of a two-finger salute to the rest of the world and being like, I'm going to do what I want to do anyway? It's like, where did it come from for you?
I feel like every decade, I feel like I've gotten younger in many ways, and so certainly meeting my husband Dave it was just wonderful to just have my inner idiot essentially be released and just be this full blown, like, I'm just weird. I'm just a weird individual, and like everybody will say that. It just never occurred to me that age would be a problem doing this, and there's so many benefits of going back to school, academia older, and doing things older, because you've made a lot of mistakes. You have all this life wisdom, or I did at any rate. Well, I like to think I did, but coming into it. So it's a very different perspective. And so I'm not quite sure if people want to call that courage or just, I don't know, I just did it because it's what I wanted to do. I'm pretty stubborn.
What does it mean to you to live a bountiful life?
Yeah, I really love this question. I think a bountiful life comes from doing what makes you come alive, and I think that means experiencing every emotion. And I think that living a bountiful life is being still and understanding what makes a person tick and what makes you come alive, what makes And that means experiencing joy and sadness and grief and despair and hope and all of these different emotions. And to me, that's a bountiful life. And that's going to be different for everybody. For some people, that's going to mean they're in one place their entire life with one person, or they're goldfish or whatever, right? But it's something that's, do you feel that life is worth living? Is it meaningful to you?
You would like this, being a researcher that you are, but I wrote this thing the other day where I said a bountiful life is to live inside the question. And
I love that.
My husband was like, if you're on stage one day and someone asks you what that actually means, what are you going to say? Because it's quite profound. And then I said, oh, well, I think it's simply about paying attention to the things that are bountiful to you. Paying attention to life. It's living your life at attention.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I love that so much because, oh, I'm going to steal that. Well, giving you credit for it.
You're welcome.
I think that's exactly it. We are people so go through life oftentimes as automatons, right? Like just not being, not just sitting thinking about what makes them happy, what makes them sad, just experiencing things. And now, of course, we have all this input with social media and movies, and there's nothing inherently wrong with any of these. But people never just, if you're constantly filling your head with things, how do you know what's your idea? How do you know what resonates with you? And I really like what you said that about that a bountiful life is about that. It's about sitting in what strikes you about life. What's important to you? What do you actually want to go over? And you know, we had talked about this before, but it's this idea of why boredom is so important. And this is John Eastwood's work as well, looking at what is the question boredom is trying to ask you. It's asking you what's meaningful. Are you doing what's meaningful?
I've always found I love boredom, which sounds weird. So I love and hate boredom. I think when I'm bored, I become restless. But I also like boredom because I know that the moment that I get bored, I go, okay, but the fun stuff for me comes after boredom, because you know you're getting to the point where I'm starting to be creative. So I get so bored that then I'm like, okay, I almost want to get bored. So then my creative self comes next.
Exactly. And there is research to back that up. And that's a really important aspect, because boredom is this, boredom isn't the root of all, everybody always looks at that, boredom's the root of all evil. And everybody forgets the last half of that quote, is boredom is the root of all evil because we do anything to avoid it. And it's that because we do anything to avoid it is the problem. And we just do things that aren't necessarily good for us, or that just fill our minds with, junk, essentially, a junk diet for your mind, rather than sitting with it. That's where creative ideas come from, is sitting and just letting your mind wander. Mind wandering is this link between boredom and creativity, letting your mind wander, which we don't think we do enough.
If you were to give us one or two sentences about the work you do and the research that you do, what would that be?
I'd say that I'm a well-being researcher. And so I look at, and in particular, I look at how the natural world impacts and our relationship with the natural world, and how that impacts various aspects of our well-being. So that's one huge chunk of my research, and certainly the area of research I'm most known for. And I also look at meaning in life, what gives people meaning in life, pathways to meaning in life. And within all of that, I certainly have some theoretical papers and frameworks. My research is very applied. So I look at interventions that people can do on an everyday basis to enhance meaning in life and many different aspects of well-being.
Do you want to give us one of those interventions?
Yeah, sure. The one my go-to one kind of, is actually the first one I ever developed, but it's a noticing nature intervention. And that is super simple. It's just notice how the everyday nature around you makes you feel. Not asking you to spend more time in it. Time in nature is good, but it's not all be all and end all. Not asking to change your routine, just as you go through your day, notice how the everyday nature around you makes you feel. And the other one is boost to elevation. And elevation is I love that emotion. It's a composite emotion. It's not, I'm not talking about feeling vitality here. That's vital, that's different. Elevation is this composite emotion of feeling profoundly appreciative, deeply moved, morally elevated, spiritually uplifted, connected to many things. If you add all of that together, that's what the emotion of elevation is. And consistently and big, but not just that it's a significant difference. The people who engage in this, notice nature around you, how it makes you feel compared to other people. But it's a big difference. It's a big, what we would call in psych, an effect size. And I find that really interesting because when I've tested that against other kinds of well-being interventions, there's something about nature that is adding something extra.
In an umbrella sense, what do we need to understand about nature and the environment to live a bountiful life?
That it is essential. I think that in really short. And that it's also, we are nature. And I think that's something that it's really hard. I always struggle a bit when I talk about the human-nature relationship, because that is putting it as two separate things, right? We are nature. We're Homo sapiens sapiens. We are a tiny fragment. For 95% of our history, we lived as one species among many, interacting in a very basic level with the ecosystem. And only about for 1 or 2% of our history as a species that we've actually lived in, buildings where it was mostly a built environment. And so we really do have this, from an evolutionary sense, an evolved inclination to affiliate with nature. It's part of us to resonate with it, to want to seek it out, and to respond with emotional intensity to it, whether that's good or bad, so-called good or bad. And I think that's one big thing I think people really need to understand about the human-nature relationship, that whether you understand it or not, or believe it or not, or in touch with it or not, it's part of who we are as human beings. And the second thing is that nature isn't something, I really try hard to get people away from this idea that nature is something that is out there, that I have to drive out, here in Edmonton, I have to drive out to Elk Island Park, or out to Jasper, or out to the mountains, or if you're, depending on your country, out to the ocean or wherever. Or even that I have to go to the park. Nature is all around us. Well, in this room, right? It's plants. It's when you go to the grocery store, where do you think your food comes from? But it's a dandelion in the crack of the sidewalk. It's the bird at the bus stop, the tree at the bus stop. So I think those two things, it's evolutionarily inherent part of us, and it is around us on an everyday basis.
Can you tell me, let's start with nature connectedness. What is nature connectedness?
Good question. So people often talk about connecting with nature. Time in nature, connecting with nature, these are verbs, these are actions, which are good. Nature connectedness is a construct. So it's the construct of your subjective experience of being in nature and how interrelated you feel with nature, how connected you feel with it. And I use the analogy of, and I stole this from John Zielinski, who's fine with me stealing it. He uses this analogy, if you think of your relationship with other people, and then you think of your relationship with nature. So you might spend a lot, or any individual might spend a lot of time with other people, but that doesn't tell me anything about their relationship to other people, how connected they feel, if they feel lonely, if they feel good, what's their subjectiveness of it. Same way with, you might spend a lot of time alone and feel highly connected to other people. And that's the difference when we look at time in nature or connecting with nature. It's the quality of your relationship. Are you being aware? It's the emotional, the cognitive aspects of it, as opposed to the construct of that measurement of how connected you are.
One of the problems you have with nature connectedness, I think, is because it's something around, like, sometimes people spend time in nature, but they're not getting in any of the benefits because they're not noticing it, they're not paying attention, or they're on their phone.
Right.
Can you talk about some of these sort of nuances?
Yeah, exactly. And this is really important. So I haven't done this study yet, but I do have this in the works. I think that anytime somebody spends time in nature, they're probably getting benefits, whether they more so than inside. Not every single time, but generally when you're out in nature, you are going to have better well-being. You're going to think better. There's all kinds of aspects to it. But it's exactly that there's this focus, there's this huge focus on time in nature. And there's the nature prescription programs, which I'm not dissing by any means. They're really important that we understand this. It's just that it's not just about time. And just to use a really extreme example, to really think the person sitting beside a tree watching a slasher horror porno flick on their cell phone, just the extreme of the thing. Do you really think that's the same thing as sitting beside that tree, noticing, engaging with it? You're not hearing, walking through the river valley, people not hearing the sounds, the wind, the birds, just the trees. And so I think we need to pay attention to both. That it's not just time, it's your engagement with nature. It's the quality of your time. What are you paying attention to?
Just quickly, you mentioned the prescription program. Can you please just explain a little bit around why doctors are prescribing nature and what the perceived benefit is meant to be?
Yeah, for sure. So there's a number of different programs. I know there's some in the States. There's certainly some in Canada, not all across Canada, but certainly BC. It's about physicians prescribing, like GPs, prescribing time in nature, like a literal prescription, a time in nature. And there's a really interesting research backing this up, that we know that when people spend time in nature, certainly their emotional, mental health is better. Also, their physical health tends to be better. Lower heart rate, or more regulated heart rate, a lower blood pressure, and the cytokine response, which is your immune response, is usually more regulated. And so there's definite benefits of people spending time in nature. There's a really interesting study. They did this longitudinal study. This was really cool, I thought. They did this longitudinal study of 3,000 people. I can't remember what country, 16 months. So they measured them at several different time points. And time in nature to address loneliness, emotional loneliness. And the results at every single time point that they measured this is a lot of people over 16 months, that people's social and emotional loneliness was lower, was addressed by that. So these prescription programs are excellent. I think that they just need to also have nuance put in them, that it's not just time.
How does a doctor or someone in like a government somewhere go, people need to spend more time in nature, it's going to make them better? Like, can you link that together for me? Because I just think it's a little bit like profound that a doctor would prescribe spending time in nature.
Yeah, a lot of work from people, people like Michelle Lam and UBC, a lot of work from people really understanding this research and putting these programs together. In some ways, marketing them. I kind of hate that word in some ways, but to understand the benefits of it.
So
it's cross-discipline work, right?
Yeah, nature can help with loneliness.
In many different ways. There's certainly that research study that was done. And also, this actually comes from a theoretical framework that I was looking at, but from existential psychology. And one of the things that connecting with nature, which would result in a higher levels of nature connectedness, but connecting with nature, feeling you're part of it, you're not just this isolated human being, right? You're part of this wider circle of life. And that's going to help address the sense of this big, in a lot of ways, existential loneliness, that we are these isolated, we're a hypersocial species, but we're still in our own separate bodies, right? And connecting with nature is really helpful for addressing that, feeling you're part of a bigger, part of a bigger system. And the other way it addresses loneliness as well is that we're more pro-social when we are in nature. There's numbers of studies have shown this. We talk to people more, we help people more.
Sort of makes me think about like quietening the existential anxiety that seems to be like quite palpable in the world like these days.
Yeah, well, and there's actually, one of my theories, or well, the big theory paper, I guess, one of them, that was eco-existential positive psychology. And I went through it looking at how our relationship with nature and affiliating with nature, responding with emotion to it, helps address all these existential anxieties. So meaning in life, a sense of identity, a sense of freedom, our choice to do what we want, a sense of happiness, and I'm missing a huge one. Death. I think I missed the big one, death.
So we talked a little bit about what's happening to our bodies in nature, like lowering cortisol, increased immune function. Can you talk a little bit about the cognitive restoration aspect of it?
For sure. So there's a couple of theories on that. So from the Kaplan's attention restoration theory, and of course lots of research to support all of this. I live my life by research. But the cognitive restoration aspect is, again, it goes back to evolution based on that we evolved in a natural environment. So that makes sense that our information processing needs are met more clearly from a natural environment. Because natural environments have we respond with something, essentially what the Kaplan's called soft fascination. So it's not like, neon traffic lights, or dancing cat videos or whatever. They're kind of reaching out and like, pay attention to me. Whereas things in nature, we can pay attention to it, but they're not necessarily grabbing your attention like that. From an evolutionary point of view, we have a pretty limited directed attention, which makes sense. Because if we had long spans of directed attention, we wouldn't have survived as a species, because we'd be staring at something and something come up behind us and eat us, right? I realize kind of a dumbed down version of that. So because we have this limited directed attention, being in nature, natural settings, meets our information processing needs much better, we're using less brain power. We actually recognize natural objects more quickly than we recognize built objects. And that's part of another related theory of perceptual fluency account. When you're recognizing them quicker, you're using less brain power, you're going to have more brain power to feel restored, to think better, to make better decisions,
to feel calm.
To
feel calm.
Not just calm, but I feel joyful as well. Right? Be more reasonable. And the visual aspect of it, which I think is super cool, and there's good research to support this, is a whole aspect of fractals. That a fractal is a mathematical structure of an object. Human-built objects are characterized by essentially Euclidean geometry. So straight lines, angles, perfectly round circles or rectangles, whereas nature is characterized by and large by fractals. And a fractal they're characterized by boundaries of irregularity, boundaries of roughness, and in particular, patterns of self-similarity at different scales. And that's something called the fingerprint of nature. And there's great research showing that when we are looking at fractals, whether they're computer generated or they're like all around us in nature, our brains are different, we think better, our moods are better. And it makes sense, it's how we evolved. Of course our systems, our bodies are fractal. If you look at pictures of lungs and a picture of a tree, there's some really cool photos looking at that. You can resonate with them.
So moving into the section on like meaning and being and rhythms, can you tell me the difference between feeling good and meaning in life?
Oh, interesting. So in psych, there's sort of this debate, and some people will hotly debate this, but something called hedonic well-being. So that's essentially feeling good. So this is, kind of from Epicurus, right? But like positive affect, lots of positive affect, not very much negative affect, and a subjective well-being, essentially thinking that your life is good, right? Good food, good sex, good whatever, right? That's feeling good. And hedonia or hedonic well-being, some will argue that it's the only kind, but I'm not sure I stand on that. But that's pretty short-lived. It's damn important, of course, but it tends to be pretty momentary. Whereas meaning in life will fall on the side, it's not the whole aspect of eudaimonia by any means. So eudaimonia is, if you break down that word, it from Latin, it actually means good soul or good essence. And that is about resonating from within, having personal aspects of personal growth, and meaning in life is part of that. What gives you a sense of meaning? And meaning tends to be feeling good. So that would be called functioning well. Feeling good tends to be kind of about me, like not me, Holli-Anne, but me, each individual, and fairly short, fairly present oriented, right? I feel good in the present now. Whereas meaning in life is about connecting your past, present, and future. It's like this string that's connecting this all the way through. And meaning in life researchers will say that there's three main aspects of meaning. So purpose, so why do you get out of bed? Besides the fact that you have to go to the bathroom. And it doesn't have to be just like one big purpose. It can be many small purposes, and that's important. Purpose coherence. Does the world make sense? Does the world make sense to you? Do you make sense within yourself? Does your place in the world make sense? Do you feel that you make sense in the world? And then significance or mattering, depends on who you talk to. Not just, it's important that we feel we're a cog in the wheel, that we're part of life, that's a part of coherence, but that are you a significant part, right? If you died tomorrow, would someone care? Does that matter? There's also an aspect now that's being proposed of experiential appreciation, an aspect. And Frank Martella is one of the world's leading researchers on meaning in life. And his definition, he's got a great book, It's a Wonderful Life. His definition of meaning in life is doing things that are meaningful to you in a way that makes you meaningful to other people. And that, I think, what meaning in life is. There's no way you can improve on that.
I love that. And I learned something around like purpose. No one's ever told me about the purpose coherence. And I feel like a lot of the reason why people struggle with their purpose isn't necessarily about finding their purpose. It's a purpose coherence problem. Doesn't make sense.
That's interesting. Yeah, because there are three very separate domains: purpose, coherence, and significance or mattering. But people often, there's a couple of researchers who will say that purpose and meaning are exactly the same. By and large, most researchers will say that there's these three separate aspects. And I think the purpose aspect, for a long time in the meaning in life literature, it was that you find your purpose. What is my purpose? Right? Find my purpose in life. And actually recently, it's more that actually when you commit to something, suddenly that becomes purposeful. We can add meaning in many ways to our lives, experiential awareness, just being aware of the present moment. But you're right, it's this aspect of, I loved what you said about that part of that connection between purpose and coherence. So people, often think of being a doctor, for example, would be very meaningful. Well, if it doesn't mean anything to the person, it's not meaningful to them because it doesn't make sense for who they are, right?
But so the difference of meaning of life versus meaning in life?
So meaning of life is a philosophical question that why does life exist at all? As a general kind of life, right? Meaning in life is what is the meaning? What's the meaning in life for Sean? What's the meaning in life for Holli-Anne? What's the meaning in life for each individual of your listeners, and your subscribers? That's an important question. Philosophical questions are important too. From individual question, it's what is the meaning in your life? That is really important for people.
I sort of love this next question, which is one of the things that nature teaches us is that nature doesn't hustle, right? It just follows seasons. Like in a way it sort of does when like I grow vegetables. The plant is hustling to grow, but it's not going fast. It's just following its process. So can you talk to me about nature being a teacher of what it means to be enough?
Oh, that's really, wow. There's a lot in that. Can you put that enough? I think really interesting. I'm going to put the enough part over here for a minute. Talk about the hustle aspect. I think exactly one of the things that, if you're aware of and spending quality time in nature, connecting with nature, so to speak, is nature does stuff in her own time, and it gives you a different time perspective. There's also research on this. It makes you seem like you have more time, partly because you're also being aware of it, right? And in a good way. I think at the same time, it also gives you a different perspective of the seasons and everything, right? I think when you look at that aspect of hustling is also, I think it's tied to this concept of moving at human speed, which is cycling a lot better than cars, walking. You notice different things. We build our cities not at human speed. We expect to live our life not at human speed anymore. And spending time in nature puts you back at a natural human speed. As you say, it's not hustling, it's busy, but it's not hustling more than it's enough, more than what it's. If you plant a sunflower seed, it's not trying to be an oak tree. It's going to grow up to be a sunflower seed, right? And I think that this concept of enough is, oh my gosh, it's just so important in life. And it's so important in life is just really what do we need to be bountiful, to feel alive, to lead a good life. We need to feel hopeful. We need to feel playful. Obviously we need clean air and clean water and food, and we need to exercise and all these things. And if we look at how we usually live, like we don't, the concept of enough is fascinating to me. That, like, how much stuff do you really need? I don't really need that much. And I think that nature it's enough in itself.
It grounds us in that, yeah. So one of the things that, obviously drew me to talking to you is that I think I'm a firm believer that there's an environment that suits each of us. And one of the things that we have to do in order to live a bountiful life is figure out what that is.
Right.
Where is that environment? What are some of the aspects? What are some of the elements? Some people absolutely love cities and thrive in them. Other people, want to live on a farm like I do and grow all of their own fruits and vegetables. So how might someone begin to discover what kind of environment they might thrive in?
Slow down. That's a really quick answer. Well, sorry. I think that's a great question because exactly, diversity is life itself. If we weren't diverse, that's how we die. It goes back to this aspect of boredom. It goes to the aspect of just being. I think that's really important, though, is to look at, slow down enough to what environments you thrive in and figure out why that is.
Can you talk about what the environment reflects in our values? There's some of the ones here I've got, like wild versus curated, quiet versus chaotic, is part of how some people should start noticing is actually like, well, what do you value?
We know that there's a lot of great research on that. People tend to, you want to go home, right? What place attachment? What is home? Part of place attachment is congruence, right? Like if you walk into a library, this is pulling from one of my students' research, if there's music playing, that's just like, what? This doesn't work for you, right? A large part of it is what you are familiar with, right? I grew up in the mountains. I grew up in Edmonton, spent a lot of time in the mountains. That's normal to me. I think that what people need to do is, what you were saying is look at the elements, whether it's more wild, what does that mean to you? Does that mean freedom, or does that have a connotation of feeling afraid and out of control? Is it calm? Is it tidy? All of those kinds of aspects, and trying some of them out too, because I think that oftentimes I'm not a nature person. And it's like, okay, well, what do you mean by that though? Like, what do you mean when you say you're not a nature person?
Interestingly on this, so at home on the play farm, we've got 20 acres and no neighbours.
Wow.
And obviously I'm doing this trip where I'm in a hotel nearly every night. And
wow.
we have quite a large bedroom at home, way larger than it needs to be. It's just how it happened. And what I've noticed is that sometimes when I arrive in hotel rooms and they're tiny, my sense of like vitality almost really cramps in, and I feel like almost, it sounds a bit pathetic, but I almost feel like a little bit like not okay because I don't have the like space for like my ideas and like my energy and being able to do my work. Like it's not congruent, to use your word.
Like who knows what makes us feel attached to a place. I think this goes back to this idea of understanding. For each of us need to understand and take the time to realize what is it that resonates with us. Because something also might be familiar because it comes from the word family, right?
But doesn't mean it resonates.
Doesn't mean it makes sense. It doesn't mean it's where we feel safe and joyful and calm at the same time, kind of alive, right? If you grew up in a chaotic household where people were yelling at each other and whatever, beating the crap out of each other or whatever, those situations are going to feel familiar and people will tend to do that. It's about stopping and feeling, when do I actually feel alive, or when do I actually feel safe?
Comes back to what you were talking about earlier, just being.
Yeah.
Learning.
Just being. I think that's important. And I look at things like, look at how everybody, even just here on campus, if you look around people's offices, right? My office is very different than, it's just my office, but very different than other people's. Other people's have offices are perfectly tidy and very clean and kind of sort of minimalist, which are lovely. I was going to think, oh, this is lovely. And I love my office. My office is just packed full of books and little weird stuffed toys and just little playthings and stuff. And that's who I am. And I know that's what I like. And I know that's what's important to me.
Is there anything else that you would say around like evolutionary heritage and place attachment, or where we're meant to be, or environments? And then also, could we talk about epigenetics and how that shapes our environmental sensitivity?
I mean, from a psych point of view, epigenetics is really important. And I think that's something that relatively recent people are starting to understand of, generational trauma. And that's a really important aspect that people that can carry that forward. Geez, I wonder if there's research on, generational happiness, almost like there has to be. Because if a woman who's pregnant with a baby has, a lot of stress and a lot of despair, a lot of trauma, it's not just her child, it's her child's child inherits that, right? Epigenetics are turning markers on and off in your system. So the same thing would be for well-being. Evolutionary heritage aspect, to me, that just goes back, because this is my whole area of research too, right? It goes back to this aspect of that we're animals. This is biophilia hypothesis. It's part of who we are. We have an inherited propensity to affiliate with all of life, to respond with emotional intensity to it. And I think that we as human beings have this incredible, ridiculous in my point of view, human hubris of human exceptionalism that started, ages ago, but particularly ramped up at the end of the 17th century, European Enlightenment, where this idea of human exceptionalism, that we are separate from nature and we are better than nature. We are at the top of this pyramid. We are an exceptional species somehow. And it's like, yeah, okay, no kidding. We've got some pretty good things going for us. We also do things as a species that no other species is stupid enough to do, frankly, right? And we also have and as a species, in some ways, we're also quite weak. I think we need to start recognizing that we are part of the circle of life. We not are. It's not that we're in the middle and everything's going around us.
For those people who haven't come across biophilia before, what is a brief definition of it?
Yeah, basic definition really is that we have an evolved propensity to affiliate with all of life and to respond with emotional intensity to it. That's E.O. Wilson. Most people forget that part of and respond with emotional intensity to it when they talk about biophilia.
Moving into urban design and public health, a lot of us live in urban environments.
Yeah, most of the world does, yeah.
So can nature connectedness still be cultivated in urban environments, or for people who don't have regular access to wild spaces?
Yes, and you know my answer to that. Yes, very much. And this is a really, really important question, though, and an important point for people to hear, that it's this whole thing of we don't have to get out of the city. It's look out your window. Everybody can have a view of the sky. Everybody can get a plant. These basic kinds of things. And if that's a way to connect with nature. And second best, but still, there's photos, there's videos. There's a really interesting work being done on that for people who, whether it's for sensory reasons or for physical access, I can't actually get outside in nature. And there's many ways to connect. From an urban planning perspective, this is really important that, for one thing, that people understand how important this is so that they can vote for people who are going to protect the nature in their cities.
Like parks and stuff.
Planning urban parks, planning trees on streets. We know that the more trees on a street, the higher people's subjective well-being, the longer people actually live, the higher they rate their physical health, the more they like their neighbors, the less crime there is. And that's not just a function of socioeconomic demographics, even when you control for that. And the sad thing is it's not equal, because you go to the roughest parts of town, and those are the places with the least amount of nature. And there's some really great studies looking at, I think this might have been in Detroit. I can't quite remember now, but looking at cities where the more use of the parks, the lower the crime rate. And people often think, oh, you plant trees or this, and we're going to be all scared of crime. And it's like, well, no, that's not actually what happens when you look at the data.
So going back into like the interconnectedness sort of
yeah,
stuff.
exactly. And using the parks and all those aspects that nature gives to people. So it's hugely important for urban planning.
So then is this an obvious question where it's like the risks of society that loses its relationship with nature or doesn't have access to nature? Do you end up with worse outcomes as a society?
Of course you do, right? And I think that even, it's kind of an interesting question, because I don't think we don't lose our connection necessarily to nature. Like, people are eating, like we're so disconnected. Pretty sure it was Beery et al. Did some really interesting research and looking at how this aspect of disconnection and what does that mean. And they looked at it within that, how it manifests in many different ways. And one of the ways is disconnected from nature in the sense of disconnected from the food we eat, right? Like, that's a huge aspect. And the disconnected from an emotional aspect and a philosophical aspect. So there's all these different angles or pathways that we can address to get people to understand their reconnection.
As you know, I have massive gardens. I love to cook. I love to grow my own food and then cook it. I get deep inspiration from that. But I also have this sense of like, there's a difference for me between eating for fuel and then eating for joy. So most of my eating is for joy and taking the time because I've like cooked and I've grown, or, that I'm really getting into my dishes. But when I'm eating for fuel, that's where I think my disconnection with my plate or my food comes from, because it's not as joyful. It's like, I've got to get something in, otherwise I'm going to have a headache on my hands or something like that.
Exactly. And there's it's a fairly old book now, but it's about like the slow movement and how important living slow is. And there's all kinds of slow movement and slow professor and all kinds of different aspects to it. And that adds in, one of the things I think that we're really good in psychology at doing, which is really bad, is siloing things and taking things apart into little tiny pieces, which is necessary because that's how we learn about them. But we are complex, messy creatures, and everything is interconnected. And this aspect of, this growing, you talked about hustle before, the growing pace of life, the rapidly increasing pace of living, which means that we have less time to cook, which means that we have less time to just sit down and eat, which has all kinds of connections to, well, we need more stuff, so you have to work 2 jobs and social inequality. And it's difficult to look at these as connected often, and certainly interdisciplinary work is difficult to do because sometimes it's like the other person's talking a totally different language. But I think these kinds of things, and I certainly think what you're doing in your podcast, is really important for people to understand that we need the views of a psychologist and a biologist and a philosopher and a dancer and an artist, because that's what life is about. And if you move any one of those blocks, so to speak, of course it's connected to everything else. And it's this disconnection of this, being disconnected from your food. But why is that? Because we're living life so fast, because of all kinds of things.
I've seen that you've done quite a bit of research around weather and seasonal rhythms and how they can influence mood and well-being. So I have some reflections and takeaways. Some of these are a little bit silly.
Oh, I doubt it. Silly is good.
Should we really sing to our plants?
That's an interesting one. And you know what? I think if people want to do that, I think go for it. It's a way of connecting, right? I don't know if there's research on it or not. I really, really believe that if you're not hurting somebody else, no matter what you do, if that does it for you and makes you happy, and that connects you with yourself and connects you with life, then go for it.
What do you think is often overlooked when people talk about nature and mental health?
Oh, just everyday nature that you have to pay. That nature is all around us. It doesn't have to be somewhere that's you have to go to or spend more time in.
What's a story or moment from your research that's really stayed with you?
The consistency of findings that when people pay attention to the nature around them, no matter in which way we ask them to do that, the impact on their well-being, particularly transcendent connectedness, that composite emotion of elevation, and that it is not a function of spending more time in nature.
Could be 5 minutes rather than 3 hours.
Yeah, it could be as you're walking to your car. Consistently, in the qualitative side of it, people will say two main things. Wow, I was surprised how much better I feel. And wow, I didn't realize there was so much nature around me.
If nature could speak, what do you think it would want us to hear?
I'm a part of you. We're all in this life together. Can we not just respect each other? And I have things to give you, you have things to give me.
Quick fire round. What, in your opinion, is the most underrated fruit or vegetable?
Oh, I probably want to say broccoli just because my husband's been obsessed with it. That's all it seems like we... But personally, I would probably say Brussels sprouts because I like them.
Worst meal that your parents made for you?
Nothing. I like food.
What word describes your life?
Blessed.
What are you most proud of?
I think I've made a difference in some students' lives.
Do you have any tenets or principles that you live by?
Oftentimes, I often think, well, if we're not dead, I could fix pretty much anything. It's benefit of being through a lot of stuff, right? That's a big one for me. Is just put it in perspective.
What's one thing that's really mattered in your life more than you realized?
Well, I think I probably realized how much the difference my mom made. And I'm probably at this point to say my husband. I am an incredibly blessed individual. If I believed in karma, I would say I was incredibly good in many, many past lives because I am very blessed by the mother that I had. And in some ways, this is a weird one, but having been born gimpy, I have learned an incredible amount from that. You learn that there's some things you're going to try and you're just going to suck at it. Life's not fair. You learn that really quick. And I think that's important, right? Okay, so if you like it, then find another way to do it and still have fun with it, or don't do it and move on. That's life. Persistence, perseverance. I think that would be a thing that took me a long time to come to that, but I think that that's one thing that has probably given me a lot.
And then the inverse of that question, what's something that you thought mattered but didn't matter at all?
Oh, how much my stomach sticks out in a dress. Honestly, I know that sounds really stupid, but when I look back and think of the amount of times, I'm much better at it now, or the amount of work I used to go through for people not to see my braces, or my stomach, do I look too fat today? And I'm still not completely comfortable with realizing that I look like I generally seem to look like a disheveled old lady, crazy old professor. But the bottom line is, it's like, who cares? Yeah. It's not particularly profound, but it's honest.
Honesty is what makes the world go round. What's something in your toolkit for when you're having a bad day or a tough season?
Bird sounds. That actually, and I know that's a nature thing, but actually really listening to bird sounds is a big one. And the other thing, did this last year when going through particularly difficult things, the first initial of the 4 people who I know, I know care about me and who would just are thoroughly good individuals and just really, and so the first initial of those, and I would just sit there and I would just chant those 4, like just you walk into the store, you walk down the hall, or I would just scribble those 4 initials out. It was incredibly helpful.
That takes me back to what you were talking about purpose and the importance of knowing that you matter in some way in life. And I think what that does is that when you're in the existential angst of, or even the angst of sadness or whatever the emotion is, or in a tough day, knowing that you matter really matters.
Oh yeah, it's huge, right? And I think there can be different kinds of mattering. There can be mattering on a social individual level. There can be mattering on a cosmic level as well. That, yeah, okay, 30 years down the road, maybe what I did make a difference. But I think that we're social creatures. And I mean, the number one source of meaning in life, the 3 top sources of meaning in life are always, the first one is always other people, relationships. That's consistent around the world. Doing things for other people, and nature is always in the top couple. And you're right. So doing that for me, because the other thing I'll sort of chant is things like just 4 activities that I like. It would be like mountains, canoeing, whatever. But that aspect of it's a basic that I could just mess things up so bad in my life and totally fail at, well, never will, but as a prof, that would be a bad thing. And as a researcher and all these things. And I know that those 4 people will still, however misguided they may be, still think I'm some sort of saint and wonderful individual, even though they see all this other stuff. Yeah, I think that was really grounding when I came upon that.
What advice would you give to your 25-year-old self?
Probably just to chill out, to trust myself. I think to trust myself more, not be so worried about how I look. Like, I always look kind of weird. Like, let's just give it up, right? Like or how other people perceive me. I think just accepting yourself and trusting yourself. I think that's a piece of advice I would give myself at 25.
What's a simple habit that makes your life better?
I laugh a lot. I do a lot of stupid things. I will sneak up on myself in the mirror and make faces in the morning. Like, I literally will sneak up on myself in the mirror, and it's like 5 seconds of playful joy. Totally changes the day.
How have you given yourself the freedom to just be who you are? Because not everyone does.
That's a really good question, and I have worked very hard at that. I think part of it was just when I went and got my BA and started doing this, it just so clicked that this is who I am. And I had an incredible amount of support from my husband. And I think I just at some point realized that, oh my God, this is just I can't use this much effort. I am never going to be this person who looks like some model or who looks this normal. And I just got tired. I think honestly, it was just I got tired. I just gave up. And holy moly, when you're just yourself, it is so much easier. It's just, life is just, and I mean, I temper that, right? I'm not going to be my full-blown self in a faculty interview. I'm just going to scare the crap out of everybody, right? I'm not going to bring a puppet to an interview. I'm not going to bring necessarily a puppet to my first class that I teach. But I think that's something that I think would be really great if more people could do that, is just be themselves. It's it's like you've taken this, because if you don't, it's like you've got this pie, this energy pie, and you've just taken a whole chunk out of it, meeting people's expectations. And then you realize you're never going to meet everybody's expectations. So just, I mean, you're still nice and you're still respectful. But I've just embraced my inner idiot. It's so much fun. And I think it's lent a lot to my work. I think it lends a lot to my teaching. It lends a lot to my research. And life just works better.
Amazing.
I'm fortunate.
Last question is really just a wrap-up one around, like, if there's one thing that people in the Bountiful audience take away from this conversation around sort of like nature, the environment, their own well-being, living a bountiful life, what do you want it to be?
Take time to just be. I think it would two things, is notice the nature around you and just take time to just be.
Awesome. Thank you, Holli-Anne, for being here on the Bountiful podcast.